Good morning. Welcome to this grade 12 webinar today. We'll just hang on for a few minutes. No, it seems as if I can start straight away and we can get going. I'm Wendy Pepler, Chief Education Specialist for Languages. Once again, welcome to this webinar. Before we begin this webinar, let's cover some of the basics. If you are struggling to hear me, make sure your audio is on and your speaker volume is turned up. You will automatically be muted when joining the session. Should you have any questions, you can ask your question in the question box below or on your right, or raise your hand. To raise your hand, click the icon on your dashboard below or on your right. Download this presentation. You can actually do it now in the handout box below or on your right. You will also find all this information in the question box below or on your right. Remember to send us your questions. Attendees are encouraged to ask questions and leave comments. However, irrelevant or inappropriate comments will result in the attendee being dismissed from the session. If we did not get your question, please send an email to academics@impact.co.za. Questions in the question box will be answered and made available afterwards. If you did not receive the questions and answers, please send an email to info@impact.co.za. You can also visit Impact's website for the recordings of the session as well as the previous sessions at https://www.impact.co.za. All past class videos and online schooling are available on the website. For June and prelim examinations, you need to study the following for paper 2. The poems: Edward, Edward, The Going, The Good Morrow, and Death Shall Have No Dominion, Toads, I Have My Father's Voice, Sonnet 146, Naming of Parts, The Child Dying, The Loss of India, Visiting Room, Remembrance, as well as notes on answering an unseen poem. You also need to study The Unlikely Pilgrimage of Harold Fry, the entire novel, as well as the drama Long Day's Journey into Night, also the entire play. For sample questions, previous exam papers can be found on My Impact. Study notes can also be sourced from the internet. Now today we are having a look at The Unlikely Pilgrimage of Harold Fry. Background. What is this novel about? In short, if you look at the back page of your book, when Harold Fry leaves home one morning to post a letter with his wife hoovering upstairs, hoovering is the more American way of saying vacuuming the house. He has no idea that he is about to walk from one end of the country to the other. He has no hiking boots or map, let alone a compass, waterproof, or mobile phone. All he knows is that he must keep walking to save someone else's life. Many of the essay questions will be based on the journey Harold takes. I will try to highlight incidents of importance throughout the novel that may be used when answering a literary essay question. What is a pilgrimage? The following definitions are relevant to the novel. A pilgrimage is a journey or search of moral or spiritual significance. Typically, it is a journey to a shrine or other location of spiritual importance, although sometimes it can be a metaphorical journey into someone's own beliefs. In a nutshell, a pilgrimage is a journey inward as well as outward. Pilgrims seek to strengthen and renew their faith through travel. Our working definition of a pilgrimage is a transformative journey to a sacred center, and we expect to return transformed or changed or converted from the person we were when we began our journey. We will not return the same as we were when we left. Pilgrims return from their journey with a boon, something good that will enrich their lives in the everyday world back at home. We'll experience life differently upon returning. A pilgrimage is a ritual journey with a hallowed purpose. Every step along the way has meaning. The pilgrim knows that life-giving challenges will emerge. Think about the following. How has Harold's past, his upbringing, shaped his adult life, especially his relationship with his wife and son? What is his state of mind as he begins the journey? And how does he change during his long walk? What does he learn about life and about himself? Discuss the marital relationship at the book's beginning between Harold and Maureen. Maureen wants to believe that Harold's desertion has more to do with Queenie than with the state of the couple's marriage. Is she right or not? Describe Harold's relationship with his son, David. What was Harold's relationship with Queenie, and in what way does he feel he betrayed her? Important things to consider in Chapter 1. Harold and the letter. Well, at this point, I trust that you have read the entire novel, as you were supposed to be writing June exams right now. But let's have a look at Harold and the letter. At breakfast one day, a letter in a pink envelope arrives addressed to Harold and postmarked Berwick-on-Tweed. The letter is from Queenie Hennessy, who is terminally ill with cancer in St. Bernardine's Hospice, and she is writing to say goodbye. Harold remembers Queenie immediately. They had worked together at the brewery many years before. Maureen, however, note that I say says that she does not remember Queenie, and soon after returns to her cleaning. Harold writes an awkward note to Queenie and sets off to post the letter. The letter, however, feels so inadequate that he can't post it. He keeps passing one mailbox and heading to the next. The importance of David's room. Daily, Maureen cleans David's room. At this point, it has not been mentioned yet, but as I presume you've read the entire novel, David no longer lives. Daily, Maureen cleans David's room, closes the curtains each night, and keeps it ready for David's return. We are told that Maureen talks to David regularly, giving him the latest news. Note too that Maureen does remember Queenie. She has a private memory of something related to Queenie. Only much later will we discover what this is. Remember in the previous slide, I said take note, she says she does not remember Maureen. Remember Queenie, sorry. During the early moments of his walk, Harold thinks about his relationship with Maureen and with David. He can't remember a single time he had ice cream with David. And he acknowledges his inadequacy as a father, thinking of how Maureen used to sign David's cards on behalf of both of them. Maureen also found a nursing home for Harold's father, and Maureen had, in effect, been Harold. Important things to consider in Chapter 2. Harold and the Garage Girl, and a question of faith. Who is Harold? Harold wonders who he is, and the reader realizes that he is actually seeking something, although he doesn't yet quite know what it is. There is no conscious decision to embark on a pilgrimage or any other kind of journey. He is motivated by his gut feeling or instinct, or perhaps even by a higher power that guides his footsteps. It is only after mulling over the question of faith brought into the picture by the garage girl that he consciously makes a decision to walk all the way to Berwick-on-Tweed and phones the hospice to tell Queenie to wait for him and to keep living. Harold notes that the girl at the garage seems to be standing in a pool of light as she talks about faith. She says that her aunt had cancer and states that it is important to have faith. Faith gave her aunt hope when everything else had gone. Important things to consider in Chapter 3. Maureen and the telephone call. Maureen has been worrying where Harold has got to, but lies to her neighbor Rex, saying Harold is at home. Rex is the neighbor who will play a fairly substantial role in the novel. However, at this point, we see him only as a lonely widower whose interest in their affairs can be a bit of a nuisance. Maureen pushes Rex away, just like she keeps everyone else at a distance. When Harold calls and tells her that he is going to walk to Berwick-upon-Tweed to save Queenie, Maureen's reaction is blunt. She is angry that he has made this irrational decision and is not supportive of him. After the phone call, she sits and thinks, remembering something about Queenie Hennessy from the past. Important things to consider in Chapter 4. Harold and the hotel guests. Harold walks for several miles on the first day and spends the night in a motel. Memories of his childhood surface, and we learn that it was a lonely one. Neither of his parents took an interest in their son at all. Young Harold learned that he was better off when he kept a low profile, and this made him lonely at school as well. These facts are important, especially if you are asked to answer a literary essay on Harold's journey from childhood to where he meets up with Queenie. The changes that takes places in Harold. It is important to know where everything starts. When the other diners in the hotel want to know about Harold's walk, he feels uncomfortable He is not used to being the center of attention because as he grew up, he chose to stay under the radar as the safest course of action. He reveals that he is walking to Queenie because she did something for him in the past, and now she's dying. Harold feels naked after exposing such a personal part of his past. The new public Harold will emerge as a result of these experiences that lead to his personal growth. Once more, very important in a question asking about his personal growth and how he grew through the novel. He had started, and in doing so, Harold could already see the end. See page 50. His walk is referred to as a pilgrimage. In contrast, when he calls Maureen, she does not share their enthusiasm. Harold knows that he can't go home to fetch his phone and plan his journey properly, because then he will never return to continue the walk. Important things to consider in chapter 5. Harold and the barman and the woman with food. Not even Maureen's lack of faith will deter him from completing the journey. He settles into a slow but steady walking rhythm. He becomes aware of the abundance of new life in the spring, and he is elated by the freedom of pushing into the unknown. He is free of the restrictions imposed by his very routine life and the emptiness of his marriage. Maureen has buried herself in constant cleaning and keeping everything immaculate. For the first time, perhaps, Harold is starting to question his relationship with Maureen and to realize that he needs to change things there too. This will bring about an acceptance of himself. Here we still see his growth. He stops at a pub where the publican remembers Napier, Harold's boss at the brewery, as a cruel man. He shares an incident that he regrets from his past and wishes Harold luck. Expectations and reality, another theme. Harold imagines himself triumphantly striding into Queenie's room with a bouquet of flowers and how she will be sitting waiting in a pleasant sunny spot. You can have a look at page 53 for this. The reality will prove to be very different with regard to how he feels at the end of his journey and to Queenie's condition. Harold's childhood. We gain more insight into Harold and the childhood that molded him into the man he became. Refer to page 55. He tried to chew quietly so that he did not annoy his father, who used to speak of him in the third person. That boy is staring at me. And his mother would brush him off as if he were a pesky fly. What makes this particularly sad is that Harold remembers these incidents without criticism. That's what his life was like, and he accepted it, merely adapting to the circumstances. And even today, he doesn't ask for help, but tries to get along as best he can without inconveniencing anyone. As he walks, Harold again thinks of an incident in the past when David nearly drowned. He was saved by a lifeguard, and Harold was ashamed that he had stopped to untie his shoes, afraid to leap in and save his only son. Maureen never said anything about this, but he knows that she held it against him. Harold and fatherhood. 65-year-old Harold, not used to such strenuous exercise, starts to dehydrate. The woman who offers him water and a meal strikes a chord when she remarks that walking isn't as easy as it seems, and neither are children. She must have had some trouble with her children in the past and found it difficult to move on or just walk away. And immediately Harold can identify with her feelings. He remembers how ignorant and inadequate he had felt as a new father, in contrast to Maureen's instinctive mothering skills. It was typical of the Harold we are getting to know that he did not ask for help in learning the skills, but stood silently by. The result was a growing divide between himself and Maureen, and himself and his son. This memory moves him to tears, and he hurriedly bids goodbye and continues his walk. Once again, he is aware that he is changing and beginning again. On page 67. His next memory is of Queenie starting work at the brewery. David had been very scornful of Napier and the brewery in general, which Maureen dismissed as his cleverness. Now Harold hopes that Maureen will tell David about his walk. Important things to consider in chapter 6, Maureen, Harold, and David. Maureen feels abandoned by Harold and wonders if he will become like his mother, who had abandoned him as a child. Despite the distant relationship between Maureen and Harold, she realizes how much she misses him and feels threatened by his walk to Queenie. She goes through his papers looking for evidence of an affair perhaps, but finds none. She also thinks of how in the past she had sometimes wanted to give up on her marriage, but remained because of David. You'll find this on page 72. Instead of confiding in Rex, Maureen continues the presence that Harold is at home with an injured ankle. She has told Rex that her husband has an injured ankle and therefore he does not see him in the garden. Important things to consider in chapter 7. Queenie. Harold's memories revealed important information about Queenie's character. She's proper and doesn't let anyone see that she's hurt by the rude comments the men make. We have already learned from the number of people who confide past regrets or secrets to Harold on his journey that he must be an easy person to confide in. He is non-judgmental. Look at how he refuses to judge Mr. Napier, despite the evidence of his brutality, and doesn't gossip about it. So, it was Harold whom Queenie chose to confide in when the men at the brewery teased her cruelly, and it was probably Harold's encouragement that made her resolve to stay at the brewery. It is no doubt the same non-judgmental attitude that gives the silver-haired gentleman in chapter 8 the confidence to share his secret with Harold. It seems as if it is the first time he has confessed his gay relationship with a young man to anyone, and Harold is the right person because he understood that in walking to atone for the mistakes he had made, it was also his journey to accept the strangeness of others. You'll find this on page 107. Harold continues to walk and think of the past while struggling with blisters and keeping his clothes clean. Once again, he regrets his failure to encourage and provide guidance to David as a young boy. And yet another incident with David comes to mind. He sends postcards to Maureen, Queenie, and the girl at the garage to thank her. Harold and acceptance of the past. There's no doubt that the walking is taking its toll physically. But in noticing the scenery and trying to come to terms with events in the past, he begins to realize that perhaps he is not so much walking to Queenie as away from himself. Page 85. He will have to learn to accept his past mistakes to find peace. This acceptance is a significant aspect of his walk that makes it a pilgrimage. Remember our definition of pilgrimage? It can be a change in oneself as well. Harold and Maureen. At breakfast, At breakfast, Harold meets a couple who bicker constantly about hiking. The man tells Harold what socks and shoes to wear and what is best for everyone. But his wife constantly disagrees with his pronouncements. Harold wishes the man was nicer to his wife, and this makes him miss Maureen. He remembers their first meeting at a dance. She was wearing a red dress. On the phone that night, she is annoyed about the money that he is spending, and she refuses to approve of his walk, saying that she has no choice in the situation. Important things to consider in Chapter 8. Harold sends more postcards to Maureen, to Queenie, and to the girl at the garage, asking if she prays. David once won a prize at summer camp for dancing. He was highly intelligent, and when he asked for books, Harold and Maureen bought him whatever he asked for. But he also often confronted Harold, making it clear that he knew more than his father. Harold. In Exeter, Harold spends a bit of time wandering around the city. Note how considerate of others he is. He continues to watch the old man dancing outside the cathedral in Exeter on page 98, simply because the rest of the audience has abandoned him. The city throws Harold a little off course. He has been drinking in the scenery and the relative solitude of his journey, able to reflect on the past and come to terms with some of it. Now he is in a hustle and bustle of people and is alarmed by it. It threatens to overturn his growing acceptance of himself. Important things to consider in Chapter 9. Maureen and Harold. Note how Maureen tries to erase all indications of Harold in the house in a way that is typical of her, by cleaning and trying to vacuum every last trace of Harold. She is angry that he seems to have left her and is spending so much money. She is so humiliated that she can't tell anyone about it. Her nightmare about her liver shows how she is battling to keep the secret of his abandoning her from others, and perhaps the conflict she feels in not confiding in Rex. When Harold says he thinks he is doing the walk partly for David, she hangs up. Maureen's conversation with David confirms her own ideas and decisions. She is shocked by David speaking well of Queenie. We have not often, if at all, heard David speaking well of anyone. And the memory of Queenie paying a visit to Maureen is one of the things that motivates her to see the doctor the following day. Another reason is that she also remembers Harold's father suffering from Alzheimer's, and she fears that Harold may be following the same path. Later we learn more of Queenie's visit to Maureen. Queenie had been fired from the brewery and stopped at Harold's to say goodbye before she left town. Maureen had never told Harold of Queenie's visit, so he had always believed she had left without saying goodbye. Important things to consider in chapter 10. We learn a lot about Harold in this chapter. Harold's non-judgmental attitude. When the social worker is amazed by Harold's sainthood and lack of fear on his journey, his reply is, "I'm an ordinary chap passing by. I'm not the sort who stands out in a crowd, and I don't trouble anyone. When I tell people what I'm doing, they look at their own lives and they want Queenie to live as much as I do." See page 117. We as readers must have noticed how much goodwill Harold generates. People want him to succeed, probably because he is so humble and sincere about what he is doing. Harold and his mother. There is a most poignant passage in this chapter where Harold, as a young boy of 12, caught his mother leaving the house forever with a packed suitcase, not even allowing him to kiss her goodbye. If she had, he knew that she would have tasted like marshmallows. Page 115. His very next memory is of Queenie offering marshmallows on one of their work trips in the car, and even then he was unable to eat the marshmallows. Chapter 10 is filled with the pain her departure caused the young Harold. Her dresses strewn on the lawn, her lipsticks and scent disappearing from the house, his 13th birthday passing without a word from her. He was called Harold No Mum at school and eventually dropped out altogether. Relatives would speak of him in the third person as if he was not present at all. It is these painful memories that affect him so negatively as he continues his walk in physical agony and does not notice anything that he passes. Page 118. Harold and the sign. It is almost as if the weather joins in a conspiracy against him as he walks into a thunderstorm. But all is well again as he asks for a sign from Queenie, and in the late afternoon the sun comes out and nature heals his fading spirit. He may not have much by way of religious belief at this point, but the spiritual aspect of the pilgrimage becomes evident in that he asks Queenie, not God, for a sign. And when it comes, he realizes that if he kept looking at the things that were bigger than himself, he would complete his journey. You'll see this on page 126. Important things to consider in chapter 11. In chapter 11, we see that, like Harold, Maureen does not enjoy attention. In her case, she does not want to expose her feelings or weaknesses and tries to keep a strong front to the public. Her consultation with the locum is amusing in that the reader can enjoy the misunderstandings that keep arising as the young doctor hears what seems to be unlikely stories about Harold, and one can see the wild conclusions he seems to be drawing. When she tells the locum that her husband may have Alzheimer's and must be stopped, however, she suddenly realizes that she is not feeling what she had set out to feel. See page 133. And she jumps to Harold's defense as soon as the doctor suggests calling the police to stop his walk. She only understands Harold's motivation when he is about to be stopped. And she also realizes that her reason for staying with Harold has not been David. She would simply have been too lonely without Harold. This shows a significant step in Maureen's growth as a character during the novel. Now you can see that could also be a possible question, is to discuss Maureen's growth during Harold's pilgrimage. Important things to consider when reading chapter 12. Harold and the cycling mothers. In chapter 12, we get some first-hand insight into Napier's character, and he is as nasty as David had said. There is foreshadowing on page 136. After goading Harold by making vulgar remarks about David, knowing that Harold will not retaliate, Napier warns Harold not to touch his prized glass clowns. Make a mental note of this, as the foreshadowing will become clear later. Harold remembers how he had been selected to drive Queenie to the various pubs to check their records. We discover that Harold and Queenie became quite good friends during these trips, and this perhaps explains Maureen's reluctance to talk about it. On the 12th day of walking, Harold phones Maureen. She sounds kinder, but is not prepared to be nice. The call ends rather abruptly when she says she hardly noticed he's gone. On the 13th day, Harold wakes up with severe pain in his leg. His thoughts of David center on David going out at night at the age of 18 without telling his parents where he was going. Despite their concern, he and Maureen did not share their worries with each other. And when the tragedy took place, Maureen had blamed Harold. This had dealt their relationship a severe blow. We will have to wait to find out what the tragedy was. On page 142, we learn that just before Queenie's disappearance, an event had happened that had finally ripped open and splintered apart. Maureen had blamed Harold, and this had been the turning point in their marriage. Things were never the same thereafter. Maureen did not cry, did not shout at Harold, but became distant and silent. Once again, when Harold recalls a particularly painful event in his past, he loses focus on the purpose of his journey and almost gives in to the wet weather and the pain in his leg. He loses his way and has to retrace his steps. The brazen cycling mother, who speaks of how she does whatever she wants and thumbs her nose at the world, has deep scars on her wrist that speak of a suicide attempt. And just after that, Harold sees a cross decorated with a red Liverpool FC t-shirt at the side of the road, commemorating a father who must have perished in a road accident. The scars of the cycling mother come to mind. Harold's desire to help her shows how he is changing and wanting to make up for his failure to get involved in the past. But the cross and the cycling mother trigger a traumatic memory of his own. An afternoon 20 years ago, Harold remembers opening a wooden door on the day when it had all come to an end. This memory disturbs Harold so much that he collapses at that moment. Important things to consider in chapter 13, Harold and the doctor. The Slovakian doctor, Martina, helps Harold to release some of the pain he has suffered from the walk, but also some of that pain caused by his memories. She has pain of her own. Her boyfriend has left her, and she does not seem to have much hope that he will return. She swears frequently, and her no-nonsense attitude allows him to admit his guilt about Queenie and about David without feeling that he is looking for help or sympathy, although he is unable to talk about the two situations in detail. It is interesting to note that despite all the swearing we come across in the novel, it is never Harold who speaks like this. In keeping with his neat appearance and everything being proper, he is a gentleman, and also a gentleman, as Queenie had commented. Harold thinks of his own family and comforts himself somewhat by considering that he was different from his father. He had a regular job and supported his family, even though he did not successfully involve himself in their lives. At least he was present. Important things to consider in chapter 14, Maureen and Rex. In the meantime, Maureen's journey of self-discovery is beginning to parallel Harold's. She nurses her regrets for what she and Harold have lost. It was not a life if lived without love, page 169. And she bitterly regrets never having told Harold about Queenie's visit to say goodbye. We can see that her jealousy about Queenie is playing less of a role, as she seems to be acknowledging her husband's good qualities. She also learns to face up to her situation and shares with Rex the truth of Harold's absence and his walk to Berwick. This results in her getting much needed support from Rex. He offers her a cup of tea and provides some comfort when he expresses his certainty that Harold will return. Note that when they talk about Queenie, Maureen is upset when she remembers Queenie arriving at their doorstep with a bouquet, but replies that it was a difficult time. Rex drives Maureen to the Start Bay Inn at Slapton Sands, where Rex talks about his wife Elizabeth. Maureen in turn remembers the night she met Harold and wonders what happened to change them so much. Important things to consider in chapter 15. Chapter 15 marks a turning point in the novel on several levels. The title will help you to remember this, Harold and the New Beginning. The turning point. Harold's short time spent with Martina marks a turning point in his journey. We may be pardoned for wondering about the title of the chapter. Harold himself thinks of how he thought his journey had started when he made the decision to walk to Berwick, but he realizes that it was only now truly beginning. See page 178. Why? He provides the answer. He had faced his shortcomings and overcome them, and so the real business of walking was happening only now. Page 178. This is indeed a pilgrimage. He continues to walk with strangers and listen to their stories, judging no one. Page 180. At the beginning of the chapter, we learn that the rest has done Harold good. He has a new confidence in his walk. He buys a few gifts for Maureen and Queenie and continues to send postcards. At a cathedral, he quietly kneels and prays for all those he has met, for the will to keep walking, for forgiveness for not believing. Harold and Maureen. Note that it is probably significant that it is in this same chapter that Maureen tells Harold she has moved back into the main bedroom. He doesn't realize what she means, thinking that she has probably moved him into the spare room. But it marks the turning point in her subconscious decision to support Harold and to change things. They talk of the night they met, but she can't remember what Harold had said that had made them laugh. The significance of the walk. Remember the woman in chapter 5 who remarked that walking ought to be easy but is not? The significance of that remark, and in fact of Harold's journey, can be summed up in the words on page 180. The world was made up of people putting one foot in front of the other. Just before he acknowledges that it is the smallness of people that filled him with wonder and tenderness. As Harold walks, he thinks about the day Maureen's mother had died, just 2 months after her father's death. They had believed they would take care of each other, but Harold believes that his failure as a father had been the real test and his undoing. He continues to find the nights that most difficult part of the journey. Queenie. Queenie had discovered that Harold liked sweets and often bought candy on their trips. She loved to hear about David, who was enrolled at Cambridge by then. But another significant revelation is made in this chapter. Harold did not tell her of David's alcohol dependence or of his drug habit. He had not even told Maureen of the vodka bottles and cannabis he had found. Chapter 15 begins to reveal why Queenie had left so suddenly. Something happened at the brewery at night, page 188, and she had taken the rap for Harold. Now, without knowing the full story, we can understand Harold's need to make up to Queenie for the cowardice he had shown in letting her take the blame for which she was fired. Harold and Queenie. Harold deeply regrets that he didn't keep in touch with Queenie. They were obviously good friends, and that was all. There was nothing inappropriate about it. Queenie did not judge him, unlike Maureen, and could be trusted not to gossip. They shared a sense of humor. Harold and Queenie once laughed so much at a joke that Harold had to pull off the road until he could gain control again. When he tried to share the joke with Maureen and David, they just didn't appreciate the humor. Nevertheless, when Queenie left, Harold did not try to find her. He realizes how much he lost by losing Queenie's friendship. He feels that he had been a coward for allowing her to take the blame for what he had done, and hopes that his walk will atone for that in a small way. Chapter 16. Harold and the physician and the very famous actor. In Bath, Harold realizes that his yachting shoes must be resoled, and he becomes aware that he is unwashed and probably smelly. Outside the public amenities, a crowd is waiting to meet a famous actor who has written a book. Harold coincidentally meets the actor inside. The actor has a much more cynical and jaded outlook on life than many of the people Harold has met on his journey. He offers his car to take Harold to Queenie, because he does not have faith in Harold completing the journey, and because he does not understand the importance of the journey to Harold and also to Queenie, who in Harold's belief will hang on to life as long as he is walking. His help involves money and little else, whereas Harold's help towards the people he meets along his journey is much more personal. Here you can see a contradiction, especially for your contextual questions. He provides a sympathetic ear to their problems. Harold refuses the offer, knowing that the walk itself is important, but his faith in his ability to do it takes a new knock. The physician whom Harold meets in the tea shop is an oncologist. An oncologist is a specialist in cancer. He tells Harold that Queenie would not have been told there was no hope unless it was true. When he points out that someone else must have written the letter for her, Harold suddenly realizes what he has sensed was wrong with her letter. She would have been too ill to write it herself. He has a moment of clarity about the severity of her illness. Far from sitting up in a sunny room, she may not be able to talk to him and may not even recognize him. He desperately needs encouragement from someone, but the doctor wonders if it is necessary to walk, implying that it may all be in vain. Harold calls Maureen, but she doesn't provide the encouragement he needs. The young man who looks like David. Harold's certainty that the young man is David is a symptom of his feeling of failure at this point. He may not save Queenie at all, and he failed to save David. He so wants to put things right that he knows it is David until he sees him face to face and realizes that it is not. This was quite a lot, and I have managed to get through half the book. As you will be writing from the 1st of July, in our next session, I will attempt to look at the main points in the rest of the novel. If you have any questions, please post them, and if you have not been able to, please send them to academics@impact.co.za. Just a reminder, if you have not yet downloaded the presentation, you may still do it. If you are not registered and would like to, please contact us at info@impact.co.za. Thank you for attending this webinar. I hope it is of assistance to you. Till next time, where we will look at the rest of the novel. Thank you and goodbye.